Welcome. My name is Dr. Pete Hilgartner, and today I'd like to talk about cancer and cancer prevention. I recently read a study that said that in 2010, cancer is going to exceed heart disease as the #1 killer of Americans. Now that's especially troubling to me because back in 1971, President Richard Nixon initiated the war on cancer, and it was supposed to be solved by 1976. Now, since 1971, billions and billions of dollars have been raised and spent on cancer research, yet all of a sudden in 2010, cancer is going to become the #1 killer of Americans, and the World Health Organization has estimated by 2012 it's going to be in epidemic proportions throughout the world. So obviously our approach to cancer isn't working. This whole idea of, well, we're going to create vaccinations, and the idea of chemotherapy and surgery and radiation, what I call the poison, cut, and burn approach, is not solving the problem of cancer. It is treating cancer, but cancer is really faulty gene expression. Now, how can I say that? Very simple. You have 50 trillion cells in your body. 50 trillion cells that have agreed to live in a community together. Of those 50 trillion cells, you have roughly 20 billion cells whose job is to simply hunt and kill cancer cells. So the reality is every single one of us has cancer in us at any one time. We're always developing mutated cells that could express, if you were in the right environment, to cancer. But you have immune cells that are designed to go out and search and destroy these faulty cells. So that's just the way we were built. So it doesn't make sense to go in and just treat the problem of cancer once it's arisen, once you have a tumor, once you have the degeneration involved in that. It makes more sense to go boost these guys and to reduce the mutations in the cells. Now, I'm going to give you just basic big bullets on cancer. I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but I want you to understand the overall big picture so that you understand that the premise that modern medicine and research is following is a flawed premise. We need to understand at a more objective level, what is the problem of cancer? What is it? How is it affecting or developing in our bodies? Cancer cells basically need two things in order to survive. Cancer cells live on sugar. That feeds them. Sugar feeds cancer. It's the preferred food of cancer cells, and cancer cells can only live in an environment that lacks oxygen. So if we understand that cancer cells will live in an oxygen-depleted environment and it needs sugar, now we have a much better and clearer idea on how to prevent it. Because cancer can be prevented. Now, one of the reasons that we have a higher incidence of cancer is because we've got more of a toxic load from our environment. We've got insults that we're exposed to, chemical insults, pollutant insults, that we are exposed to as human beings now that we have never seen before. Every year, I think it's something like 3,000 new chemicals are introduced to our environment that never even existed before. So if we look at 100 years ago, cancer was a very, very, very rare condition. Again, cancer is faulty gene expression. But what has changed in those 100 years? Our environment. Our environment has significantly changed. Not only do we have more pollutants in the air, in the water, in the soil, but we're using pesticides and additives and preservatives in our foods that make our foods not foods, but what I call frankenfoods. They're not foods for optimal human consumption that facilitate what I call genuine replacement parts. Your body's always in a state of tearing down and building up, tearing down and building up. And unless I'm providing it with the right building blocks in a clean environment, I'm going to start getting faulty gene expression. Now, specifically, we know that sugar and lack of oxygen will facilitate the production of cancer. So how do we reduce the sugar? Simple. Stop eating sugar, okay? Sugar wasn't eaten and consumed in mass quantities until probably the late 1700s. Okay, and now it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. We've got high fructose corn syrups and things like that. And we've come up with all these fake sugars or manufactured sugars that our body doesn't really know how to handle. And these sugars bypass the normal metabolic pathways, creating an imbalance in our acid-base balance in our bodies, the pH balance. Okay, so by reducing sugar, and what I mean by sugar is not just the table sugar, the refined sugar, okay, but that's a huge one, obviously, but simple carbohydrates such as breads. By the way, our breads are just laden with sugars. We add more sugar. We've developed such a sweet tooth in our culture, especially with the last 30 or 40 years, the big low-fat fad. Well, fats taste good. So we have these low-fat foods now that don't taste very good, so they add more sugar because the American palate demands that. However, it's killing us. So unless we really want to just keep going on the path that we're on, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, which, by the way, is the definition of insanity, we need to change some things. So reducing breads, reducing pasta, reducing rice, reducing our intake of potatoes, okay, the simple carbohydrates that are broken down and will change the acid-base balance of the blood. But it also provides a lot of this, which if we are in a state of imbalance, it just keeps feeding it. Now, I talked about how the intake of sugars and simple carbohydrates will change our pH, okay? It makes us more acidic. So a highly acidic body is a body that lacks oxygen. That's just chemistry, okay? So an acidic body lacks oxygen. Now we're in a state of cancer development, okay? We're in a state where we're providing the optimal environment for cancer to thrive. This whole equation here, by the way, reduces immune system function. Okay, so that 20 billion cells, we've just reduced that down. So think of cancer almost in the context of an insurgency. Okay? We're very familiar from this whole war on terrorism about insurgencies, the war in Iraq. It's a counterinsurgency. Well, cancer cells are continuously developing, and we've got a little patch over here, and a little patch over here, and a little patch over here. And as long as I've got those cells that can go in and find those and destroy those little patches or those cells, if I all of a sudden eliminate the soldiers to do that, well, guess what? I've created an environment where these cells can do the recruiting. They can go out and they can get more cells involved. And really, we have to look at cancer as an insurgency in the body. If we eliminate the food source, the energy supply, if you will, in a wartime situation, we talk about getting rid of the money supply, the arms supply, the ammo supply, okay? But then if we create an environment that is untenable for those cells to proliferate, in the human body, to follow this analogy, we create an environment that is rich in oxygen. It has to have enough oxygen because a lowered oxygen state allows these cells to grow. In an insurgency, okay, and I'm not trying to solve the insurgencies of the world, but this is one way to do it, is we have to create an environment that becomes untenable for that insurgency to proliferate. Now, believe it or not, this is a little tangent, but it'll come into context. Believe it or not, since the founding of the United States of America, there have been people who would like to see this government and this country fall. That's an insurgency. But we've got an environment set up that doesn't allow that to express through, doesn't allow that movement to take hold. It's the same approach we have to have with cancer. Now, specifically, what can you do? Well, again, we have to reduce sugar, simple carbs. Okay, then anything you can do to boost the immunity is going to help. Well, one way to boost the immune system is to exercise. Now here's the paradox. Exercise also, too much exercise, can produce inflammatory byproducts that help suppress the immune system. Okay? So just because you're exercising doesn't mean you're necessarily healthy. It's the right type of exercise. Okay? So if I exercise too much, I'm actually tipping the scale the wrong way. All right? So just enough exercise. And there's a lot of detail on that. But it helps balance hormones. It helps increase oxygenation of the tissue. It helps balance blood sugar. It helps set up an environment that is cancer resistant. Okay? The other thing we can do is a regular detoxification. What do I mean by that? Well, think of your colon, your digestive system, your immune system, your lymphatic system, your liver, kidneys, blood. All of those are not only delivering nutrients to your body, but they're removing toxins. They're removing all the waste products of normal metabolism. Well, if I get into the state of imbalance, everything becomes sluggish. So think of the city streets. What would New York City be like within a month if everybody left 50% of their garbage out in the streets every day? It'd be pretty significantly bogged down, okay? And over time it would putrefy, and we would have all kinds of other infestations and problems. Now, if I did that, and now I have an infestation of rats, and all I did was go solve the rat problem, I'm really not solving the real issue, am I? Okay? So this is where I say, well, we're following the false premise. We're trying to deal with a rat problem instead of getting the streets clear of trash. All right? So detoxification, I always recommend 3 to 4 times a year to do a significant colon cleanse. And we've got a number of resources on our website where we talk about the various types. Now, you can have a detoxification, you can have a fast, you can have a purification. And I delineate those on the website. So I encourage you to go to the website. I'll give it to you here. It's www.drhilgartner.com. Okay? Also, if you read my book, The Secrets of How to Feel 20 Years Younger in 90 Days or Less, I give a lot of information on detoxification, purification. You can find that book on that website as well. Okay, moving on. Some of the other things that we can do. And this might blow some of your minds, okay? Chiropractic, all right? Specifically, there's a technique called, yeah, I can spell, Advanced Biostructural Correction. Now, I've used a number of different chiropractic techniques. I've studied many and I've taught many. But this is a very specific one that sort of takes the whole profession to a whole different level of understanding. A lot of the information is based on research that was done by a neurosurgeon in Sweden. But if I am able to apply this to get your body from wherever it is into a state of better relationship in space-time to gravity, your oxygenation utilization, your ability to utilize oxygen in your body goes up. It has a direct effect on the cells of your immune system, has a direct effect on your ability to fight cancer. It also helps digestion, mood, attitude, respiration, cardiovascular function. So no matter what you've heard about this, I can tell you that that's a big piece of the equation for prevention. Now, I'm going to be clear here. I'm not saying that chiropractors can treat cancer. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this is part of the piece of the equation. If you really want to have cancer prevention, you've got to include some sort of body work, and from my experience, this is the one that works the best. In my practice, in my life, this is what I've done. Okay, so We talked about some of the other things we can do. You can increase probiotics. Probiotics are the good little bacteria, yeast, funguses that have to be in your gut. Most of us, we've had too much antibiotic use, we've had chlorine in our water, we've had fluoride in the water, we've had all sorts of chemical exposures that have reduced the probiotics in our gut. So if we don't have a balance of good, healthy flora in our gut, there's an imbalance in the immune system, and that reduces our ability to have a counterinsurgency in our body, okay? Cancer prevention is really a counterinsurgency. Cancer is the insurgency in the body, okay? And then the other thing we need to do is we need to increase our consumption of fermented foods. And again, on our website and in my book, we've got more details on that. However, these two go hand in hand, okay? And when I'm saying the X through here, don't get confused. I want you to have these, okay? And one of the ways you get those is through eating fermented foods. You can also take over-the-counter probiotics, but they're never going to be as effective as good homemade fermented foods. And I'm not talking about a lot. You need to have maybe a tablespoon of some kind of a side dish, fermented side dish, with each meal for optimal function of your gut and your immunity, and that's going to help with cancer prevention. So, for cancer prevention, I talked about what cancer is. Cancer, think of it as an insurgency in the body. You have 50 trillion cells in the body. Let me get that right page. We have 50 trillion cells in the body that have agreed to live in an organized community. Roughly 20 billion of those cells are involved in fighting cancer. The best thing we can do is we can feed and fuel and supply and resupply those cells so that they can keep the rest of these cells functioning optimally. We have to change our paradigm of cancer. It's not just about going and treating the rat infestation from the bogged down toxins in the body. It's about removing, eliminating, and keeping those toxins out of the streets, if you will, if you want to go to my New York City trash analogy, okay? So that's it's a completely different approach to cancer treatment. But it's a holistic approach. We need to stop treating cancer. We need to start preventing cancer. We need to prevent cancer by understanding how the relationship of our body, our genetics, and our environment are so inextricably intertwined that the indication or the fact that cancer is about to outstrip heart disease as the #1 killer of Americans, when cancer it was almost non-existent 150 years ago. Yes, people did die of cancer, but it was a much later age. But now all of a sudden it's going to become the most dominant threat to health worldwide. I think we're following a false premise. Here's a different approach. Here's what I consider to be a better approach. And if you implement it in your life, I think you're going to find that you feel better overall and generally. And by the way, when you take this approach, not only is it going to help prevent cancer, it's also going to help with heart disease, osteoarthritis, and a number of other chronic conditions that, again, modern medicine just is not doing a good job in treating those problems. The pharmaceutical industry is having a great time trying to create new treatments for it. But this whole war on cancer, it's really not about trying to find a cure, it's about trying to find new treatments. We really need to just prevent it. Okay? So I hope this gave you a little introduction or a little better background or overview of what the problem of cancer is, and hopefully empowered you with some information so that you can take some action steps. One of the things I always teach my patients is the word doctor means teacher. My job is to make you more informed so you can make the choices to need me and people like me less. Thank you.